So the big question is this: how do young men like us, who didn't listen to society, who are on our own, how do we grow and improve ourselves so that we can live a better tomorrow? That is the question, and this show will give you the answers. My name is James Radzinski, and welcome to the Ascend Momentum Show. Welcome back, everyone. So you read the episode right. Title is Transurfing Principles Part 8. Now, all of these episodes are standalone. You don't have to listen to the past ones in order to listen to this one. So you can get away with just listening to this. However, if you're brand new to terms in transurfing, it's a book called Reality Transurfing, then you may not understand certain things like pendulums, excess potential, and a bunch of different things. So if you don't understand what those mean, then I recommend going back to number 1, Transurfing Principles Part 1. But if other than that, you guys know how this works. All of these are just a culmination of my notes from past studying sessions in a book called Reality Transurfing, Steps 1 through 5 by Vadim Zeland. And a lot of these things that I'm about to say are just straight from the book. And the way these episodes work are I just speak, I write, or I say word for word exactly what I wrote down, which is usually word for word what's in the text. So I'm going to say exactly what is written down, and then I'll speak on it. And I've got probably like 6 pages, usually have 6 pages of notes to speak about. So with that being said, let's get right into the episode. Move towards your goal in good spirit, and remember, whatever happens, the alternatives unflows in the direction it should. No one can know when or how the goal will be achieved. All right, so this is something that it's got coordination of intention all written all over it. So I really okay, so the reason why I really like transurfing is because it literally tells you exactly how to win at life. It tells you exactly what to do in life. It tells you exactly how life, like the world works. And the way the world works is when you have your thoughts set towards an objective, when you're running that target slide in your mind, then you're basically, the world is like, oh, there's the order. You're sending an order to the world, and then it's creating a path towards the goal for you. And so when you're moving towards your goal in good spirit, that basically is meaning that you're running the target slide. So you send the order out, and just you have to remember that the alternatives will unflow in the direction that it should. Like the nature always takes the path of the least energy expenditure possible, path of least resistance. Nature never wastes energy. So when you send your order out to the world will basically find the most efficient route possible. And it's basically like it's going through there's this movie, I don't remember what it was called, but it was basically like there was a bunch of kids in a video game, and they were they basically had to get past some stages, some levels, and then they were just going through it normally. Now, this would be inner intention. They would just go through the stages normally. That's how your mind their minds were basically setting the path forward, and they were going through the levels, completing the levels in the video game, how it's supposed to be done, like how they see it as it should be done, the obvious way, the obvious means per se. And then there was this one character in the movie, and he would basically he had all the cheat codes, and then he was able to like move through walls, and he was able to finish the video game so much quicker than the rest. Now, this is basically inner intention versus outer intention. The cheat code guy is using outer intention. He is going with the flow because the cheat code guy sent his order out to the world. His order was, I want to finish the game. And then the world was like, okay, here's the right path forward. And so the guy basically went like, it went in the direction because the guy in the game, the guy wanted to cheat, but let's just, for the life example, the guy, when he came across a cheat code, that's out of the norm. He probably would have, like most people, when they come across a situation that's against their plan, like their script that they've come across, like their plan that their mind made. If it goes against that, then they'll probably just throw their hands about in the water and then try and paddle in a different direction, try and steer a course and fix the direction. But this just makes matters worse. So you just understand that the alternatives flow is unflowing. It's going in the direction that it should, and no one can know how or when the goal will be achieved, and not even you. Only the world knows. The world always manifests the desire, or no, my bad. The world always manifests the choice you make for yourself. So this is true. Everyone makes a choice on exactly how their life will be. Now, most of the reason why people's lives are usually around the same like quality that it is when they were born is because we're in a mirror world. Our world is a mirror. So they look at the world and then they react to it. They display their relationship to it. So everyone has a starting point, whether it's poor or rich. You start somewhere. And then the reason why people tend to the reason why the rich tend to stay rich and then the poor tend to stay poor, and people tend to believe that their lot in life is exactly what they get for the rest of their lives, is because when they first are born into that area of life, then they look at it and they display their relationship to it and their attitude to it through their emotions, or through their attitude and their worldview and just all their mental outlook. And what happens is they actually display that attitude, and then that, since the world is a mirror that reflects your relationship to it, that relationship gets reflected back. So then they're basically seeing that they're poor, and then they're like, oh, I'm poor. So then they reflect it into the mirror, and then it gets reflected back, and then they're poor. And then it's just a positive, it's just a feedback loop. And now they're in a closed feedback loop where they're constantly either they're usually getting poorer and poorer and poorer, or they're just staying stagnant. They're staying in the same spot. Now, all you have to do since the world manifests your choice perfectly, then all you have to do is reverse that feedback loop. So what you do is, instead of first looking at the world, first display your relationship to the world and display it exactly how you would like to see the world become. So if you would like to see the world become extremely careful for you and extremely generous towards you, then display your relationship to the world as such. Like, the world takes care of me and is extremely generous towards me and leaves the best for me. And then once you do that, since the world is a mirror that displays your relationship to it, then it will reflect that back. Now, another mirror principle is that instead of a normal mirror where it reflects instantly, the world mirror actually has a delay. So you have to hold that image in your head for quite some time, maybe days, maybe months, quite some time, and then it will start to reflect back. And that's exactly how the world manifests your choice that you make for yourself. Allow yourself not to know how events should develop. So one of the things that humans have a tendency to do is, the human mind has a tendency for rational thought, and it has a tendency to want to create a plan on how to move forward. The mind always tries to create a plan on how to move forward exactly. And so when you decide that you have this specific goal, the mind creates a plan on how to achieve it. And that's all about inner intention. And that is going against the alternative flow because you very rarely get what you planned for. Like you very rarely receive what you planned for. And so if you just allow yourself not to know how events should develop, then you're basically allowing the world free will to get help you develop that event on its own, like actually meet you halfway and help you, because the world is far more powerful than you. Like the world is far more powerful than your mind. So just allow the world to help you, because it will, because it's a mirror and it has no other choice. Prosperity is the norm and demands minimum energy expenditure. So one thing is that problems are not normal. Like all of the wildlife, like all wild animals, they have a problem-free life. Yes, they may get eaten, but that's just the way things go. They don't really necessarily come across problems like we do because we create our own problems through our importance levels. Like our mind creates problems, and our mind also decides our lot in life. And since our minds are highly susceptible to this thing called pendulums, pendulums basically only benefit from us being in the ditch, essentially. Pendulums don't benefit from us being prosperous and going our own way and basically having our own free will. So pendulums basically take control of our minds and actually like manipulate our mindsets to make us make the decision that we deserve less than prosperity, a prosperous life. And so as a result, we go from the norm being prosperity to we spend a lot of energy having less than like a highly abundant life. And that's because of pendulums. Our world is so rich and generous that it has enough wealth to go around as long as each individual moves towards their own goal through their own door. So this is actually, it just makes sense that people, okay, so whenever you go through your own door, you go towards your own goal through your own door, then you are basically guaranteed success and you get way more than you actually were striving for in the first place. You receive an abundance of wealth as a result. And it actually makes sense because not very many people like strive towards their own goals through their own doors because they're all caught up in pendulums, and pendulums instill in our minds goals that are foreign to us that benefit only the pendulum. But they basically provide the illusion that since the pendulums program us to want what it needs, we have the illusion that we're chasing our own goal when in reality it's not. It's just the pendulum's goal. And so that's why most people in this world, even if they're goal oriented, they're not really abundantly wealthy because they are caught up in the pendulum's goal. And the world is actually so rich and generous that it can actually afford to give everyone everything, but not everyone chooses to have everything. But that doesn't prevent you or me from carving out a nice little comfy corner in the world and having our own everything, basically. Like you can have it all. If you do not control reality, reality will control you. Now, this was the chapter summary. It was the shortest chapter summary in the entire book. And I believe it was from the Letters from the Past chapter. And that chapter was basically just Vadim Zeland responding to a few letters that he received from readers of the books. And he basically summarized, usually the chapter summaries that he provides are probably like 1 to 2 pages long. But this was just one line. If you don't control reality, reality will control you. And this line really struck me because I'm connecting all the dots actually, where I've been focusing on, or well, not lately, but like the past year or so, more than probably, I've really been focusing on the physical side of things, like my fitness, my health, all of that stuff. But that's just controlling my physical body. Now, I'm just a physical body that's living in my world. And how do you control your world? Well, the way you control your world is you control your metaphysical body, which is everything that goes on in your mind. And when you can control your mind, you can control reality. And a lot of people, like most people, don't control their minds. They have their minds like, if you ask anyone, they will respond with the fact that their minds basically speak randomly all the time, and they're constantly on, and they're just speaking random things. And there's no people don't really control their minds. And so all you have to do is control your thoughts, and then you will control reality. But if you can't control your thoughts, then reality will control you because of the mirror principle. When you can't control your thoughts are basically scattered. And then since we're prone to negativity, we're sending out negative thoughts, and then that's sending out the reflection back of negative. And then since we look at the world, we're in a closed feedback loop where we see negative, and then we respond negatively, and then we get more negative. Like it's a constant circle, and it's a constant loop. And that's basically like, if you don't control reality, reality will control you. You will be in that endless loop of just despair. But you can break it, and all you have to do is control your thoughts. Like that's really all there is to transurfing. Control your thoughts. Like transurfing, there's no real physical element to transurfing. Like he doesn't say go do 10 push-ups. He doesn't say go meditate. He says control your thoughts, and then he tells you exactly. He writes a 750-page book on exactly how to control your thoughts and what they should be. So that is basically like, that's all there is to it. Just control your thoughts. Whatever a person does in reality, they are just playing. So this these next couple ones these next couple quotes I'm gonna be saying are on the lines of how we're basically our most innermost. Here, let me actually find it. Like our let me find it. Okay, the goal and purpose of all living beings is to control their reality. So everything that we do comes down to one thing: to control what is happening with your will. And since, okay, so boredom is a thing. Boredom basically means that you are not, like, reality is uncontrollable and you're not controlling reality. That's what boredom means. So people create games to distract themselves. That's why children are playing, like they're playing hospital, they're playing adults, like they're doing all these games. And adults actually play as well, except they self-importantly refer to their play as work. Like they say, I'm working. But in reality, that just means I'm playing, but I'm treating it seriously. And children treat their play seriously as well, except adults put importance onto it. And basically, since reality, because people don't know how to control reality, since people don't really know how, like, reality works, they find it that they can't control reality, so they just play a game to distract themselves so they can actually have something to control, because that's all we really want to do, to control our reality at our will. And it's easy to control reality when we're in a game because there's a set outcome usually, and there's like set rules that we already know how they work. So boredom is a constant and insatiable thirst to shape reality. Every day reality is boring because it is uncontrollable. Yeah, all of these like next four I just talked about, but that's like Transurfing is a technique for controlling reality without direct impact. So instead of playing a game, like usually people just fall asleep and they play the pendulum game. Like that's the easiest game to play. Just fall asleep and have their consciousness asleep and then play the pendulum game. But then that is what happens when reality controls you. And then you're basically just a puppet on strings. Now, transurfing is a technique for controlling reality without direct impact. And that sounds like a game to me. Just play the game of transurfing and you'll learn how to control reality. This is why I know that I'm so grateful that I read Transurfing so early on in my life, because I know there are some people who read Transurfing like later on in their life and they had extremely beneficial results, but I'm so glad that I have this early in my life so I can like go forward within my entire life using these principles and understanding the way the world works. So every individual is the direct creator of the layer of their own world, but the majority of people do not understand how this process works. This is okay. So since the majority of people don't understand how the process works, this is why we have like the 99% and 1%. Like 1% of people have the majority of wealth in this world. And that's because the 1% know how the process of controlling their own creating their own layer of their world works. Those 1% are the outliers because they chose themselves and they understood the principles of the world. They understood how the world worked. And anyone can be a part of that 1%. That 1% can turn into 100% because, like I said earlier, the world is so rich and generous that it has enough wealth to go around for everyone. So if everyone learned how to be like, if everyone understood that they were the direct creator of their layer of their own world, and they understood how it works, like they understood the principles of transurfing, then anyone can be successful. Like not just 1%, everyone can be. And I'm so happy because I didn't learn, like they don't teach you this stuff in school. They don't. I went to I'm in the American education system. Even still, I'm a senior, so I'm about to end it. But they don't teach you this stuff in school. It's because school is a pendulum and it doesn't benefit from you going out and becoming great. School does not benefit from that. School benefits. That's why it's a whole system. It's a whole system and it benefits from you being a 9 to 5 worker working for the rest of your life. And when in reality, if you simply just studied transurfing, I haven't even finished reading it twice, and I've already I already know exactly, or not exactly, but I've already got such a clear understanding of how the world works, and I have such a very good knowledge on how to achieve my goals. Life should be free of problems. That is the norm. And like I said about the wild animals, like wild animals don't experience problems like we do. We create our own problems through our mind, our attitude, our worldview. And all we have to do is just drop importance, go with the flow, and life will be free of problems because it's the norm. Like it's a normal thing to be free of problems. It's like actually in nature, it's actually weird and it's like a very weird and different thing to have a problem ever. There are no good and bad people, so everyone is equal. And this is exactly like all judgment is relative. When you're judging someone, you're basically placing yourself on a pedestal. You're saying, I am better than you and you're worse. And like, it's not like everyone is equal on an energetic level, everyone is like the same. And so you should not be judging people because if you do judge, then you're actually going to reduce your own influence on the world because of you're creating excess potential, and then balanced forces strive to eliminate that excess potential. And what they do is they simply just destroy your influence on the world. Any judgment is relative because it is generated by comparison and contradistinction. I just said that. Be yourself and allow others to be themselves. This is huge. one of the things that I found when I first got into transurfing, and even still today, I find myself doing this, but I catch myself a lot more. So I do it a lot less now. If I find other people breaking the rules of transurfing, or even in like other things, for example, when I see people doing things that are bad for their health, like especially if I care about them, then I try to like fix it for them, and I try to tell them like, oh, you shouldn't do that. But it's just let them make their choice. Like allow them to be themselves. Because if you're yourself, be yourself. Be yourself and follow the transurfing principles and be yourself and do all of the healthy things. That's you being yourself. But then you have to also allow others to be themselves. And if they choose to like smoke weed, if they choose to break the transurfing principles, if they choose not even to if they choose to not know the transurfing principles, which is a choice, then let them make that choice and let them be themselves. Loosen your grip and give the world free rein. So, our mind is the thing that always has the grip of like the strong grip over the world. And our mind is nothing. Like, our mind is not capable of understanding and seeing the path forward, especially if you've spent the majority of your life being conditioned by pendulums. Like I've spent I'm I've spent 17 years of my life, and even still today I'm conditioned by pendulums, but I'm just going to say I've spent 18 years of my life being conditioned by pendulums. Like my mind is not how it could be. And so if the like most optimal mind, the perfect mind is still not capable of understanding and knowing everything, then what makes you think that a mind that has been like morphed and formed and shaped by pendulums will be able to understand everything? It won't, because a mind that's shaped by pendulums is limited in its view, and it's not even able to see clearly. It's like a fly beating against a window pane when an open window is just a few inches away, because the fly can't see the open window. It's not in its worldview. People are mostly driven by subconscious motives. All right, so we since we are basically in a waking dream, we are dreaming. Everyone is dreaming to some extent or another. And in dreaming, like at nighttime during REM sleep, in dreaming, you are actually, your soul is flying through the alternative space, and your mind actually is kind of like asleep, but it's like awake enough to manipulate the situation according to its subconscious like worldview. Its subconscious basically decides like how the script should go about, and it's like, oh, if this person is there, if I get into a fight with this person, if you're used to losing, your subconscious will actually manipulate the dream to you losing the fight. Like that's how it works. And so people are mostly driven by subconscious motives, and that can end up very badly, because especially since living in a world of pendulums, those pendulums manipulate our worldview and shape it to how the pendulum wants it. And we're mostly driven by those subconscious motives, which are shaped by the pendulums. So we can actually end up very badly, but all you have to do is wake up and live life consciously. The driving force that creates these subconscious motives originates external to the human psyche from pendulums. So that is, our subconscious is actually like controlled by pendulums, basically. That's why when your consciousness is asleep, you're basically gripped by pendulums. A person's level of awareness is particularly low when they are at home or in a crowd. So this is something that you actually have to be very wary of, because when you're in a crowd, if you've ever heard of the word mob mentality, that's a real thing. Like people tend to just completely forget who they are, what they stand for, and they end up doing like incredibly bad things in a crowd, and afterwards they're like, whoa, why did I do that? And they kind of recall it as a dream, like that, because they were so, their consciousness was so deeply asleep, and they were just driven by those subconscious motives that were like being controlled by the pendulum, and the pendulum was the crowd. Like, that's the mob mentality. The mob is a pendulum, and it's controlling everyone's thoughts, and they're all asleep. So you just have to be extra careful and wake up. When one's consciousness is no longer subject to external influence, and then I put in parentheses, pendulums, close parenthesis, events are perceived from a clearer perspective. Now that is okay. So when you are living subconsciously and you come across a problem, you're probably gonna not know what to do, and you're probably gonna think it's a very complicated problem. And that's exactly the same thing as the fly. Remember the metaphor? The fly is beating its head in the glass pane when there's an open pane right to the side of it. That is because the fly is like basically asleep, and it's living life subconsciously, and it's directed by the influence of the pendulum, and that pendulum benefits from the fly feeding it energy, banging into that glass window. It doesn't benefit from the fly just flying off. So what the pendulum does is it controls the fly to basically attempt at this problem. The problem is that it wants to leave the house, like it wants to get outside, but it sees a glass. So it tries to literally just go through it, but it can't. But if the fly were to just wake up and look around, it would see the open window and the problem would be fixed. And that's exactly how living waking life is for everyone. When you come across a problem, just wake up and then look around, and then you'll see the solution. The important thing is not to be a puppet on a string, to act with conscious awareness, and to use these structures in your own interests. So pendulums, when I first read the Transurfing, I originally interpreted pendulums as like completely bad. And then I realized that pendulums are actually, they're all destructive, but you can actually use them accordingly to your own will. Like, you can use them in your own interests. So they're not actually bad. For example, I use the pendulum of the gym to lift weights and get stronger and get jacked. Like, that is a good positive pendulum for me. Even though it is destructive, it's helping me along my goals. And pendulums are actually what like help you manifest your goals and help you actually achieve your goals. So when your consciousness is asleep, you're basically a puppet on the strings, and you're acting according to the pendulum's rules. But if you just wake up and you act with awareness, then you can use the pendulum in your own interest. Wake up and be aware of how pendulums are trying to manipulate you. The power of the pendulum's influence is inversely proportional to awareness. And then I have an arrow pointing to pendulums only have power over you whilst your consciousness is asleep in waking life. So if you are asleep all the time, if you're just living life like a daydream, then you're constantly going to be controlled by pendulums. And then you're basically going to be the victim of circumstance. You're going to be trapped. But since pendulum's influence over you is inversely proportional, so that means that your awareness level basically determines how much influence they have over you. So if you have low awareness, then they're going to have a lot of influence over you. But if you have high awareness, they're not going to have any influence over you. And they only have power over you while you're asleep in waking life. Set yourself free from the pendulum by falling into indifference. This is a very powerful strategy. So you wake up and then just remain indifferent because it is just a game. A pendulum is formed by a code of behavior, an agreed type of thinking. There must be a set rule. Do as I do. So this is, okay, so stars are born, but pendulums light them up. And this actually comes up in a few quotes that I'll actually repeat that. But since stars are born and pendulums light them up, they usually tend to highlight their success, and then they basically say, do as I do. So that's why people try and copy LeBron James. And that's basically a pendulum trying to hook onto you and control you by saying, do as I do. And you do it and you fail miserably. Modestly put, the pendulum. Okay, so this Vadim Zeland said modestly, the pendulum rule is the worst and most harmful thing humanity has ever invented. The pendulum rule, which is do as I do. And you're basically changing yourself. So the rule do as I do basically means change yourself and betray yourself. That is terrible. If you change yourself and betray yourself, that's basically your mind changing yourself, and then your soul, so your mind is basically locking your soul up in a box and locking it with a lock and key and not letting it out. And then the mind is basically putting on a mask and changing itself and acting differently. Now, your soul, your heart will not let, like, your heart cannot stand that. Like, that's literally the worst thing ever if you change yourself and betray yourself. So just be aware of that. Refuse to follow the pendulum rule and walk your own path. And the next one is stars are born, but pendulums light them up. So when you walk your own path and you follow the principles of transurfing, you will become a star. And so that's when you're born. But pendulums will light you up once you walk your own path. They have no other choice but to. And so they'll light you up, and then a new rule will be formed. Do as I do, except they do what you do. They do as you do. Leave the line without a fight. They will try everything to keep you, but ultimately there is nothing they can do if you do not enter into conflict. Now, let me explain what that quote means, because I'm not sure if he said that this was an actual social experiment that happened or if it was just like a story. But basically what happened is a bunch of like men in suits or like black, full black costumes. So they're just in all black. Then they would all basically get people in a line. So they would direct everyone to stay in a line. And if someone tried to leave, then the man in the suit would basically try to get they would yell at that person and say, get back in line. And then the person would go back in line because they're asleep. And so they were basically listening to the pendulum rule, do as I do. And they were also just puppets on a string. They were doing exactly what they were told to do. But if someone tried to break out of line and the person said, get back, and then the person started to like fight and resist physically, then they would just drag them back in line. And like if they would start a fight, they would drag them back in line. But if a person tried to break out of line without a fight and they just like walked away and said goodbye and smiled with complete indifference, then there's nothing the men in suits could do. The person would just walk off on their own. So that's basically like the fight with pendulums. So like they will try everything to keep you in, but they can't do anything unless you enter into a fight. And so if you just remember the rules of the game, then just don't fight. Just don't enter into a fight. Reconsider your current worldview. This was this was repeated throughout Transurfing all the time. And this I actually wrote in my journal a long time ago. And I was like writing in my journal maybe like a couple months ago. And I actually went back and looked at it the other day. I was just like browsing through my journal and rereading some of the stuff in there. And I saw it and I said reconsider my worldview. Like transurfing reconsider my worldview and switch it to transurfing. And I'm still doing that to this day. Like, you always have to reconsider your worldview. It's so valuable because that's like your mental outlook. Because if you don't like what you have, if you're not 100% satisfied with your current world, your current life, then reconsider. You definitely have to reconsider your worldview because that is what's holding you back. Transurfing will not be of any interest to those who prefer for their ego to stay sleeping. So, ignorance to transurfing is still a choice, and people will make that choice. It's called the blue pill. If you've ever seen The Matrix, people do choose to stay in the blue pill. We all receive the things we choose. Illusion is also a choice, and anyone who prefers to stay with the illusion has every right to do so. The blue pill, just what I said. The extent to which the elements of the structure act automatically depends on their level of awareness. All right, so adherents to the pendulums are basically acting automatically according to a program. So pendulums are like a program. They basically run exactly how they were like coded to do. And since pendulums control people, they basically control people and then they instill that program into people. And so people actually act like a cog in the machine automatically. So all the, like in a machine, in like a car, everything works automatically. That's why it works. So that's kind of like a pendulum and like having a bunch of adherents. Everyone just works automatically. And the level, like the how automatic someone acts actually depends on their level of awareness. So if they have a very low level of awareness, like most people, then they're going to be acting completely automatic. But if they have a high level of awareness, they'll not be acting automatically. They'll be acting with choice, through their own choice. If you follow the structure's rules, you can forget about your individuality. That's exactly like being a cog in a machine. And no soul wants to be a cog in the machine. A soul wants to live their own life. If you fall, okay, all you have to do is wake up and observe the scene through the eyes of the observer whilst you are still on the stage. And this is all about stepping down from the auditorium, or stepping down into the auditorium and watching the play as a participating observer. And this gives you a huge advantage. You have like this advantage of having awareness of like the rules of the game, so you can act with indifference and you can actually act with impeccability. Plus, you're not controlled by you're not controlled by the script that the pendulums have laid out for you. It is not enough to simply reject the pendulum rule. You have to replace it with the transurfing rule. Be yourself and allow others to do the same. This was my big problem when I first started reading transurfing, like I said earlier, where I would like learn the transurfing rule and then I would reject the pendulum rule because I I learned about the pendulums and I rejected it. So, but then I would be aware and I'd be awake, but then I'd see other people still under the zombifying effect of the pendulum. And so I would like judge them. But that's their choice and you should let them be themselves, because I'm being myself by rejecting the pendulum rule. I'm being myself by following the transurfing principles. But it's not enough just to reject the pendulum rule. You have to also replace it with the new rule of be yourself, which you're already doing, and allow others to do the same. Allow others to be under the influence of the zombifying effect of the pendulum. It's their choice, and only they can get out of it. You can't save them from it. The structure teaches us to want what it needs us to want. So this is what I was talking about earlier. Like the school pendulum does not benefit from you becoming the richest man on the planet. So that's why they don't teach you how to become the richest person on the planet. The school pendulum benefits from you being a 9 to 5 worker working the rest of your life. So that's what they teach you to do. Like, don't listen to, like, school teaches you to be a 9 to 5 worker. So if that's not what you want to be, then don't listen to school. Like, listen to transurfing. Awareness is heightened when the focus of attention is directed inward and not outward. Now, I believe what he is saying is by when you're focusing on like external information, like how other external information, I don't really know what the outward part means, but when you're directed inward, you're basically focusing on your own thoughts. When you're focusing on your own thoughts and you're aware of them, then your awareness is heightened. When breaking harmful habits, change the script and scenery. All right, so this is one thing. One of the examples he gave is a smoke break during work. And if smokers have a smoke break during work, and that's like the script and the scenery. The scenery is at work in the back, like where the smoking area is, and then the script is the smoke break. And so if you are trying to quit smoking, then it doesn't make sense to stay at that job and still go out to the smoke break. So what you should do is just change the scenery. So either quit the job or find somewhere else to work, and then what was it? Change the scenery. Oh yeah, change the script and the scenery. So don't go out for a smoke break. That's all. If you use the products of civilization irrespective of your will, you give away a portion of your energy to pendulums. So if you're asleep and you're still using the products of society, not consciously choosing, for example, anything that's part of society, computer, phone, food that's like not organic, food that is organic that is been like farmed, like a chair, like anything that's created by society and you're not consciously choosing, you're giving away your energy. There is nothing wrong with making the most of the benefits of society. Wait. Oh, okay. There's nothing wrong with making the most of the benefits of civilization as long as you do not become addicted or dependent. So, as long as you don't become addicted to smoking, alcohol, like anything, like video games, then there's nothing wrong with making the most of like all the benefits of civilization. Like when you have your downfall is when you become addicted. You can tell a free individual from the herd because of their awareness. So there's a thing called the shepherd and the sheep. So the shepherd is free on their own and they're aware of their role. They're aware of their place in life. But the sheep are not aware and they're kind of just flocked and they're herded to one place. And so that's why you can actually tell the difference between someone who's free and not by their level of awareness. Return to the wild, run away from the farm. So this, I don't really completely understand what this means, but I really liked this quote, so I wrote it down. Any dream is essentially brought about with the help of pendulums. Like I said earlier, like this is why pendulums are not, like you shouldn't just completely you shouldn't try and avoid all pendulums, because pendulums are actually beneficial because they help you bring about your goals and your dreams. It is simply a question of, wait, what does this even say? Oh, it is simply a question of whether the structure deprives you of your dreams or helps you realize them. So like I said, dreams are essentially brought about with the help of pendulums, but it's whether that specific pendulum is your pendulum or not, if it will actually help you towards your goals or not. So the school pendulum will absolutely not help me towards my goals. And so that's why I stay indifferent to it and avoid it, because that's why I'm graduating early and that's why I have a very short schedule. And so but the gym pendulum will help me, and the ascend momentum pendulum will help me. The podcast pendulum will help me. Like all these pendulums will help me move towards my goals and help me realize them. The mirror is not capable of producing the future. It only ever reflects the present. So the future, this is why in your visualizing, you should never say I will have, or your affirmations, never say I will have. Always say I have. Like when you're making a toast, always say I have good health, or I have good fortune, or we have good luck. Like good luck is always with us. Never say things in the present or in the future, because the mirror can't reflect that. The mirror can never produce the future. Like it only knows the present, because the future doesn't exist. The future is always in the future. Like it just makes sense. The future is always in the future, and the present is always in the present. So never frame your orders to the world. Never frame your order in the future. Always frame in the present, because that is the language of the mirror. Everything is going wonderfully because I shape my reality with my intention. I know how it is done. There's plenty of different affirmations that he writes down throughout the book, and this is a good one, because if you just remind yourself that you shape reality with your intention. So you shape reality with your intention, and you know how it's done. And the way it's done is by controlling your thoughts. If you control your thoughts, then you control reality. Let me get some water. Every time you find yourself negatively reacting to the reflection of the mirror, so whenever you find yourself reacting to the physical reality, then remind yourself that everything is going wonderfully because you know how to shape your reality. And the way you do that is by placing your order through your thoughts, through your worldview. No one can keep importance to a minimum forever. So when I was first starting to read Transurfing, I was actually like getting very disappointed at myself, because a lot of the times I would actually forget that I would forget to keep importance to a minimum. And over time it's gotten a lot better, but now I've allowed myself to make mistakes. Like I allow myself to make mistakes, because you can't, like, no one's perfect. You're only human, and you can't keep importance down forever. And allow yourself to make mistakes here and there. Allow yourself to get angry here and there. It is not a game. It is a dance with the shadow. So the Dances with the Shadow was a chapter, and he didn't really reveal the nature of pendulums until like the very end of that chapter, where he's basically saying a pendulum is a shadow, invisible, cold, and merciless. So a pendulum is like a shadow. So your shadow is always connected to you. Like you cannot outrun the shadow. And most of the time, people are like chasing after the shadow. They're trying to run after the shadow, and they can never catch it. But if you just go your own path, then the shadow is forced to chase after you, and it will never be able to catch you, because you're going your own path. And the only way it'll be able to catch you is if you place importance and you're caught by the strings of the puppet on the strings of importance. Then you will be like forced to change directions again and chase after it another time as well. So you can never get the better of the pendulum, just as you can never outrun your shadow. So that's like, you can never like win in a battle with a pendulum. Anytime you battle a pendulum, you always lose. Like it's always a negative energy exchange. So you can't outrun your shadow. So what makes you think you can get the better of a pendulum? You can't. Initiate your game. Be yourself. Shape your own reality at your own decision. Initiate your own game. Be yourself. Like the more and more I study and like learn and teach all this stuff, the more and more I understand a lot of stuff is getting connected. Initiate your own game. Play the game of the transurfer. Be a transurfer. Be yourself, and you'll shape reality at your own decisions, through your own mindset, through your own worldview, your own mental outlook. And that's all there is to it. If you don't control reality, reality will control you. in order to become a star in your field, you have to know how to exploit the features of a pendulum. So, like I said earlier, stars are born, but pendulums um, shine, or pendulums light them up. And that's because the stars are born, so they go their own way, but they also know how to exploit the features of a pendulum. And there's actually um the popularity wave. He actually gave two examples of the Beatles, and I'm pretty sure the ABBA. I don't know what that is. I don't know if I said that right or if I even said the right thing. It's from memory, but pretty much the Beatles, like, were, before they became popular, they basically were not very known, and then they started like performing at local cafes and performing at local areas. And then they built up a small fan base, and then after a little while, eventually they had one like surge of popularity. Just one song made a hit. And then there was kind of, people were like, "Oh, this is not going to last forever." And it didn't. It went stagnant after that. Like, and it was almost as if the wave came in and then hit that song, and then it pulled back in to gain more power. And so there was a stagnant period, and then eventually, after a couple of months or years, I don't remember how long it was, but eventually the wave returned with an amazing force, and they became a hit, and they became the most popular ever. Like they became very popular. And that's basically how it works. So that's, I don't know if it'll work like that for my podcast. I'm not really sure, but that is like, I'm basically going with that attitude where I'm kind of expecting a small little fan base, and then I'll get a nice hit, and then it'll like fall back. I'm not sure if it's the same with podcasts as it is with music, like bands, but we'll find out. And you guys are on this path with me. You're on this journey. Only on episode 68, and I've got quite some time. Like, I've got like 300 episodes left until I verify or disprove the Russell Brunson statement of you'll never have to worry about money again if you post daily for an entire year. Stop chasing your shadow, then pendulums will have no other choice but to follow you. And that's exactly like what I was talking about. So honestly, I still don't really understand completely the shadow metaphor. And I predict that the next time I read the book, I will understand a lot more, because that's really what happens. Like, in the beginning, in the first time I read the book, I understood the mirror metaphor. It was the easiest for me to understand at the time, because it seemed the simplest. But the second time I read it, I realized that I didn't really understand it as well. But now I understand it a lot more, and I'm sure the more and more I read it, the more and more I'll understand. And it's such a valuable thing to study. And I'm so grateful that I read Transurfing a second. Excuse me. I'm so grateful I read Transurfing a second time through and studied it and taught it on the show, because I'm 100% sure that if I didn't like teach Transurfing on the show and I just studied it, then I would not have as much understanding. And I'm also 100% sure if I just uh read Transurfing a second time through and not studied it, then I wouldn't have as much of an understanding either. So it's all about studying, and it's all about like learning and strengthening your understanding. But I've also been drawing a lot of pictures in my studies, like on, not like on all of them, but when he explains like certain topics, like the dual mirror topic, and like different little sketches I draw every once in a while. I probably have like less than 20 pictures in my whole journal, and I've filled up like more than 2/3 of my entire journal so far. So I haven't drawn that much pictures, but I found that they're very useful. And actually, when I was reading Expert Secrets, it did help me understand it a lot more when I would draw my own pictures. All right, so that's the end of it. And I already have like enough notes to make another Transurfing Principles episode, and I'm not sure if I might try and finish the book tomorrow, and I might try and get enough time on Monday, but I doubt I'll have enough time to do it. So I have enough notes for another Transurfing Principles episode, but I'm not sure if I'll actually be able to do it for quite a few amount of time, because I'm like very limited on time before I go to Funnel Hacking Live. But to wrap things up, don't forget to download your favorite episodes and subscribe to the Ascend Momentum Show. But before you guys leave, make sure to look up at the sky.